Welcome watchmakers and hobbyists. My name's Cole and I'm an independent artisan watchmaker in the US. Thought I would create a video series that shows the basics needed for using a watchmaker's lathe, what you need to buy, the different materials to have on hand, the different tools needed, and stuff like that. So I thought with this little YouTube series, I could start you off from finding a watchmaker's lathe, finding the tools that you need, finding collets and attachments and so on, and stuff like that. So we will start with the basics of turning and make our way all the way up to turning complicated parts, adding high-end finishes and stuff, making jewels from scratch. And so, we're just going to kind of go step by step here. So for this first video, I'm going to show you what you need and what you kind of get when you purchase a watchmaker's lathe, and what to look for when you're trying to find one. Now, before we start, I want to point out a couple of books that I think are fantastic resources as far as turning for a watchmaker's lathe here. So the first one I'm going to show you here is the Modern Watchmaker's Lathe and How to Use It by Archie Perkins. This is a great book. I happen to find this one brand new. They're quite expensive, but he's got a lot of good stuff, and it's more kind of late 20th century, early 21st century stuff. So it's new procedures and new processes that we can use to kind of learn how to make the most out of our lathe. The other one here is Practical Bench Work for Horologists. This is by Louis and Samuel Levin, the people that make the Levin watchmaker's lathe. And so most of their stuff is geared towards whatever attachments they have, but there's a lot of good, useful information in there. So I recommend picking those books up, reading through them, kind of getting a little bit of become comfortable with the parts of a lathe and stuff like that. So we're going to start with what to look for and what you're going to get when you purchase a watchmaker's lathe. Now, if you go on eBay and you type in watchmaker's lathe, there's going to be a lot of them up there, and you kind of want to decide where you're at in the world as far as what the tooling is available to you. I'm in the US, so I have what's called a WW pattern lathe, Webster Whitcomb, and it's just the bed shape, how the attachments for the bed attach, the headstock and stuff like that. So this is an 8mm lathe, and so that's the most common, and that's the most common collets you're going to have. So that would be what I would recommend you go with. Unless you're more specialized and you're making stuff for clocks, then you might want a 10mm lathe. If you want something even smaller than this, you can do a 6mm lathe, but I would recommend going with an 8mm lathe for your first one, just because the tooling and collets and everything that are available for us to purchase are 8mm mostly. So when you purchase your lathe, you're going to see, maybe you can get one for $200 or $150 on eBay, and you're thinking, wow, that's a heck of a deal. Well, a lot of times you're going to get just the body of the lathe, and you might get a tool rest here. This is a flip tool rest, and you might get lucky and get a tailstock with it. If you don't get these things and you get just the body of the lathe and the headstock, $200 is not really that great of a deal, because you still have to get the necessary tooling needed to make this usable. And another thing that you're going to need is a motor. You're going to need a motor for the lathe to run it, and if it doesn't come with one, you're going to be tasked with finding a motor for it. So make sure that you're very stringent on what you're looking for and what comes with it. And a lot of times they're not going to come with any collets either, and collets, as you might find, are kind of the most expensive part of a watchmaker's lathe, other than a slide rest and stuff. But the collets are what's needed to hold the stock in the lathe and to be able to actually use it. So if you don't have collets, those are an added cost. Some people are selling them for, they might be $20 a piece. If you can find a whole lot of them, then that would be great too. But you want to make sure that the collets you purchase match the headstock of your lathe. Now this is a Mosley lathe I purchased. I think they're probably the best lathe out there. A lot of people are going to say the Levin is the best. It's really just personal preference. I think Mosley just has the best design. Again, it's a WW patterned lathe, so it's really not that much different, but I think that their accessories and the tooling that they offered is kind of the most ingenious and of the highest quality. So when you have your lathe, you have the body right here, which is the main part. Then you're going to have the headstock, and you're going to want to make sure that the bearings and everything are good in the headstock. You'll be able to feel if they are grinding a little bit or anything like that. And so if they're not in good shape, you're going to have to rectify that. And if it's not running true, that's another thing you're going to have to rectify. You're going to have to lap the bearings or figure out something to do with those. Sometimes you will get a drawbar. This is a drawbar. This attaches to the collets and pulls them tight in the headstock, which will hold your piece. If you don't get one of those, again, you'll have to purchase one or find one. I've also purchased another one just from China. It is about 40 bucks, but it's not the same quality as a steel one that has the Bakelite handle and everything on it. Another thing you're going to want to make sure that you take a look at is the quality of the pulley on it. If there's a lot of chips in it or if it's broken, that could cause you problems. So make sure that you're inspecting the quality of the pulley that comes with it. Another thing that you're going to want to make sure is, I would suggest that you only buy a Watchmaker's Lathe that has its original tailstock. Now these are drilled from the factory, matched to the headstock. So they'll put a collet in there and they'll drill the hole for the spindle for the tailstock, and it'll be on center for the headstock. If you don't have that and you buy a lathe or a tailstock that is for the same lathe that you have, it'll work, but it might not be centered exactly to your lathe, and that could cause problems. So you want to make sure that you purchase one with the tailstock. The spindles also, you want to make sure that it comes with spindles. If it doesn't come with spindles, hopefully in this video series I'll show you how to make new spindles for your tailstock. It's not difficult, but it requires a little bit more precision and some extra tooling. And then another thing you're going to look for is, does it have a tool rest? This one is a flip style tool rest. It can be used obviously for turning, and it can be slid along on the rail, and we'll use that for resting our gravers on. So that's kind of what you want to look for when you're purchasing a lathe. You're going to want collets if you can. A lot of times you'll get them in these kind of boxes here, and whoops, dropped a few things, but it'll come with collets, and you're going to want to make sure that you have collets with your lathe. If you don't, that's going to be an added expense, and that's fine. A lot of times they don't come with them, but you're going to pay a premium for them. So collets, you want to make sure your tailstock is matched and all that. So that's the basics of what you need to use the Watchmaker's Lathe. Now you're also going to need a motor, and mine came with a motor. It's this old Watchcraft motor, and it didn't come with any belting, so you're going to want to make sure that you, again, will purchase some belting if you need it. It's good to have belting on hand as well. This stuff is pretty easy to cut to length and to join together, and you want to make sure that it's joined within your headstock pulley area, so that way you can run the lathe from the motor. It's going to come with a foot pedal or a rheostat or something like that. I would recommend a foot pedal just because it's so much easier to be able to control that speed of the lathe with your foot than it is to run it with a dial. With that, we're going to now move on to what I think is the necessary tooling and accessories that you're going to have on hand to turn basic parts with your lathe. To start with, you're going to need magnification. Now, I wear glasses, so I have these kind of loops that attach to my glasses that I wear when I'm just doing watchmaking. You're going to want some lighting. I have also a magnified kind of deal that I put over top of my lathe while I'm working on it. It just kind of helps, but it doesn't do everything. I'm still going to need to use a loupe, but I do like the lighting that it provides. Then you're going to need gravers. Now gravers can be either made or you can purchase them. This is one that I purchased. I don't know if it's going to autofocus here. But or I didn't purchase it. It came with a lot of stuff that I purchased for Watchmakers Lathe. Otherwise, you can just buy high-speed steel and make your own. And we'll get into that later. But yeah, you can make your own. It's quite easy, and I tend to do that quite a bit. I keep these two just because I like the size of them, and I've shaped them quite well. So you can either use square pieces, or you can get these round ones, and these round ones are pretty good too. Like I said, I'll show you in a later video how you can make your own gravers out of high-speed steel or 012 tool steel, which is my preferred steel that I like to keep on hand. Then you're going to need some measuring devices. Now I have this standard little, it's just a little 6-inch steel rule, but it gives me a good indication just kind of roughly what I'm looking for. I use the millimeter size. Most things in watchmaking, aside from pocket watches, is metric, and I like to measure in metric just because it makes more sense than imperial. So then for measuring distances and diameters, if you want kind of a rough, I guess I wouldn't say rough. These are fairly accurate calipers. These are just Shars that I purchased. They can be had for about 40-50 bucks. And then you're going to want a micrometer. Now these micrometers are also very good. They're very accurate. That's good for measuring more precisely. This one will measure, I guess it only does 100,000ths, but of a millimeter, that's pretty good. I like that just because I feel like it's a little bit more accurate than the calipers, but I could be wrong. It could just be a placebo effect. And then you're going to want files. Now files are good for rough shaping before you're going to polish anything, and I would recommend these are Grobet. Yes, these are Grobet, which are jewelers. These are needle and escapement files you would be looking for. I like the barrette file because it's got two safe edges on either side, so if you're filing something flat, it won't be cutting into the side. I like this rat tail one again. For if it's not quite for broaching, but you know, you can round out a hole pretty well with that. And then I like this. It's called a 3 square. Again, this is I think these are double-aught cuts, so they're pretty fine. Or they're 6. I can't even remember. It's been so long since I bought these. They're made in Italy. They're high-quality files, and that'll make a big difference. Don't buy cheap files. They don't have a consistent cut. Those are the files that I use the most. I use them for all kinds of stuff outside of the lathe, as far as, you know, finishing parts, crossing out wheels, stuff like that. They're great. You're going to want some stones as well. This is a ruby slipstone. You can get these either very expensively or fairly cheaply. I've used the expensive ones. This is a cheaper one that I've got on AliExpress, and it does a pretty good job. It's not super fine. I would say it's probably equivalent to maybe 6,000 or 8,000 grit stone, but it does cut very well. If you're polishing with it, it will remove material and leave a pretty nice finish. This is an Arkansas stone. These are much finer. I use these for also dressing tweezers and screwdrivers, and we won't get into that as much. Maybe later when we get to attachments for the lathe, but you always got to have some nice stones on hand, and not your, you know, your pressed India stones. I think those just don't quite have the finish that we're looking for on a lathe. The other thing that we're going to want with a lathe is some diamantine. Now this is Bergeon diamantine. You can get it in a couple different grades. This one I think is this is the extra fine, and this will put a nice polish on something when you're looking to polish a pivot, or if you're going to polish pinions, you know, by hand. This is just a piece of high-speed steel that I turned into a burnisher. You're going to want to, and I can show you guys how to do that as well. You'll basically just drag this, horizontally, or not horizontally, but you want the lines to be horizontal in there, on a stone, and they're pretty fine. And then we harden it, and that will burnish steel very well. The other thing you're going to definitely need is a jeweler's saw. Now these, again, can be fairly cheap. They're not that expensive. The frame, I find, doesn't make a huge difference, but what does is the blades. Now you don't want to purchase just kind of run-of-the-mill blades. I fully endorse these super pike blades. Most of the stuff that I get for finishing and watchmaking comes from the jewelry side of things. I got to study under a jeweler, and he taught me a lot of things as far as putting a high quality finish on something. And these super pike blades, for cutting material to length, are fantastic. They don't break as often, and they're very sharp, and they hold their edge very well. Another thing you're going to want is some dividers. Now these are ground and hardened to a very fine point. If you are putting a center in a piece and you want to mark out the diameter that you're looking for, these are great. You just get the radius, you set the radius on this, and you can kind of set it on the piece as it's turning, and it'll cut the diameter that you're looking for. So hopefully you guys paid attention in school and remember how to find radiuses and diameters and the area of circles and stuff like that, because a lot of the stuff in watches is circular. The other thing that we're going to want to talk about here is the materials that you're going to want to have on hand. Now you're going to want to have some brass rod on hand. I like to keep a couple different sizes. Brass is used very heavily in watches, especially kind of the lower tier watches. Jewel settings are made from brass, and these are fantastic to have on hand. This is just a small assortment of what I usually keep on hand. I have a ton of stock, flat stock, sheet stock, everything like that. But you're going to want to have a lot of brass, and we're going to learn on brass. We're going to practice turning with brass because it's easier. It's a softer metal, and it's a lot easier on your tools and stuff until you can kind of get used to turning on steel. Now, the other steel that we're going to have is, or material, sorry, is steel. Now, when I'm making balance staffs and things like that, I like O1 tool steel. It's a very high quality steel. It's oil hardened. It hardens very well, and it holds its shape pretty well as you're turning it. It's not too difficult to turn, but again, we'll get into that later when we're making parts, and you're going to want just a couple different diameters of that to have on hand. I like to keep, anywhere from 2 millimeters up to, I think I have some 7 millimeter stock, and that's just used for making spindles and things like that. So we're going to want to keep some material on hand to make parts, because we make a lot of stuff in the artisan style of watchmaking. I don't generally like to purchase parts movements. If something's broken on a watch, I like to make it, because that's kind of the old school way of doing it, and it's more artisan and more hands-on, and you end up with a higher quality product, because when you're finishing your own parts, you're putting a better finish than what the factory generally puts on there. And then the last thing we're going to talk about here is collets. Now, but a good set of high quality collets is going to get you a long way in watchmaking, and we'll talk about collets later on. And the different styles that they are. These are wheel collets, and we have some special ones for turning balance staffs that still have the impulse jewels still attached. And we'll get into that later. But just kind of want to show you things that you're going to need for doing this. So hopefully this first video kind of gives you a general outline of what you're going to need to get into turning for watchmaking. And with our next video, we're going to talk about, and I'll show you how to do some basic turning with some brass, and then we'll move on from there, and I'll show you different attachments that you can get for your lathe, and we'll get you to the point where you can turn specialty parts that you need. We turn a lot of screws here. We make, you know, balance staves, wheels, pinions, stuff like that. So the next video, like I said, we're gonna do, you know, basic turning with a graver. We're gonna show you how to make sure things are true in the chuck, and different truck accessories. You know, you can get different collets and different specialty faceplates, and I'll go through that as I have a few I can show you.